Welcome to the Lexington Public Library's Tales from the Kentucky Room podcast, where we discuss everything Lexington and Fayette County history. I'm Mariam, and in each episode of this podcast, we will feature a guest that will share a piece of local history. So thank you for tuning in and enjoy. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another podcast. Today we have Denise Shanks. She is one of the librarians here at Central, and today we're going to be talking with her about Joyland. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you. I'm delighted to talk about Joyland, which was an amusement park that was here, started back in the 20s, and it had become a major entertainment venue here in the Bluegrass through into the 60s. If you think about like maybe Kings Island or Six Flags of today, it was kind of that big a deal then.
Okay, so how big was it?
Big, the area, 25 acres was one figure I ran into. Now, whether that was all Joyland or just land around it that they owned, that it was pretty big size. But it opened in 1923. It wasn't the only little amusement park at the time in the area. There was another one called Bluegrass Park I found in the newspapers that was off Versailles Road. And it was actually owned or run by the Kentucky Traction and Terminal Company that ran the bus system? And the interurban system, the little trolley cars. But after Joyland opened, it really didn't do so well, and it
kind of fizzled.
Yeah, it fizzled, and it
didn't stand up to the competition.
It was different, and I get the feeling that the Traction Company, which ran interurban up to Paris Pike, decided they would just do without it.
Just close it down.
Yeah, they'd close it down and let Joyland.
Where was Joyland exactly?
Yes.
Where was it located?
If you go up North Broadway, you know where you pass under I-64? I-60? Just look off to the left, and that's the area now. There was a bowling alley that replaced it. But it's in that area, just about where Broadway changes to Paris Pike.
Okay.
That helps
so the northern end of town.
Yes.
So when did you say it opened?
In 1923, I found an ad that announced that they were opening May 30th, 1923 in the Leader.
In the Leader in the newspaper.
It was really fun.
I'm sure it was an exciting time for Lexingtonians to have another amusement area and all that.
Well, this was the roaring 20s. This was before the Depression hit, and people apparently had enough leisure time and
money to spend.
And apparently it wasn't very expensive. They during the week, admission was free, I'm sure. I couldn't find any kind of ad that said how much the rides cost, but apparently admission was free, and then there were other costs for, whatever food or anything.
So who owned it?
There was a group of men who were together, but two of them were brothers. The Sauer brothers. F.K. Sauer was president, and John W. Sauer was vice president. And they were also managers for many, many years. Frank Brandt was the secretary and treasurer of the Joyland Amusement Company. And they had a variety of people who came and went as people who directed various parts of the enterprise, like the Joyland Inn.
So like a little hotel?
And casino. It was a little restaurant with different rooms that groups could, it was like meeting space. That different rooms could arrange.
So it was more
than
just an amusement park. It was just like a gathering space for entertainment and such.
The park offered something for everyone, really, in a lot of ways. Families with children, because they had a lot of picnic ground area. And, of course, the courting couples could come. And they offered softball diamonds where the local baseball teams could come, and they finally even had their own baseball team, it sounded like, from what I see. Where other community baseball teams would come and play them, and it sounded like a lot of fun. And then there was this ongoing carnival where they had a Ferris wheel, eventually a roller coaster. They had the carnival rides where there's the little boats that the kids ride in, and the merry-go-rounds and carousels. They had quite a variety of things like that. They even at one time had, I wouldn't call it a petting zoo, because they had a bear and an alligator.
Don't want to pet those.
No. But they had a variety like birds. They advertised it as a miniature zoo because it featured a monkey, a bear, that I'm talking about, a wolf, alligators, variety of birds, an anteater, of all things. And these animals were managed by Hilbert English.
Oh, wow. So I guess they were just captured and put on display for people to...
I'm afraid so. Yes, it doesn't sound very humane, but...
But I'm sure it kept people entertained.
And it was called the Joyland Casino. That's where they offered a great many musical performances and concerts by, I'm sure, local musicians as well as some nationally known names eventually.
Do we know who they were?
In the 20s and 30s, there were these names. I'm sure that you remember them well. Before we were ever born. The Blue and White Orchestra, Paul Bees and his orchestra, Kansas City Nighthawks. Now that sounds jazzy. Ray Anthony and his orchestra, Bill May and the orchestra, the Kentucky Masqueraders. Notice these are called orchestras, but there were often 7, 8, 10-piece bands is what we'd call them. I think back then things sounded a little more formal. Later in the 50s, some of the famous names that I could find in the newspaper ads were like Duke Ellington, so really quality. Skitch Henderson. Louis Prima, Keely Smith, and Lionel Hampton. They were many of the top names in jazz during those times. I looked to see if maybe Louis Armstrong or Ella Fitzgerald, or some of those names came. I never did find any evidence of that. Oh, well, it would have been nice. I'm sure they came to Lexington. It's just not to Joyland.
Not to Joyland. All right, so Joyland became a part of the community. What were some of the ways that they contributed to Lexington?
Well, they offered free admission during the weeks to anyone who came in. I think they did charge admission and holidays and special times. But then they also would charge for the rides and things like that. That's usual.
That's how they made money.
Yeah, that's how they would make their money. But they also offered free admission and possibly even free rides to several of the area orphanages. So the children who were a little less fortunate could come and participate and enjoy and have fun. They also held fundraisers for various community charities and orphanages in the area. So they were really a part of the community,
so they
besides being employers in the area. And they also were partners of the Herald and the Leader to give free swim lessons to Fayette County children for many summers at Joyland. And the newspapers also partnered with the Douglas Pools, which was the African-American swimming pool there, since this was in the times of segregation and the Jim Crow South. So many a child learned to swim at these pools during the summer
and at Douglas. Was Joyland segregated?
I'm afraid from what I could see, it was pretty well segregated.
I'm sure like other places around town during that time.
During
the pre-Civil Rights era. African Americans weren't allowed to go into specific
They were allowed
areas.
to work there, I'm sure. But yes.
Unfortunately, that was consistent with a lot of entertainment places around Lexington and around the country as well during that time. And I just felt it was important for us to mention that on a history podcast.
Yes. There had been hints of scandal at Joyland.
Oh, goodness.
Do
tell.
One lady that used to come into the Kentucky Room quite a bit commented one time that her father told her when she was a teenager to never go to the Joyland Casino because there was gambling and drinking and just wasn't the kind of crowd he wanted his daughter. So, of course, she and her friend went.
Of course, just like a good old teenager would.
Exactly. Yes. And they were escorted out, I'm sure, with all decorum. The Joyland Casino, please don't get the wrong idea that the casino was what we think of as a casino with nothing but gambling and booze and everything, though who knows, maybe some of that went on.
I'm sure.
But it was really used to have all these concerts for dancing and have some of these nationally known bands come in. It was a gathering place for the community to come, for you to go on a date. I found a piece in the paper where there was actually some kind of a trial where there was an investigation that Joyland did have gambling going on, and they weren't convicted or anything like that. But yes, that was a bit of a scandal. In one newspaper article I found, there was a man who was reminiscing about growing up and actually going to Joyland to buy moonshine. I don't know whether to believe that is true, that was his memory, but I thought that was interesting. Apparently, people could do what they wanted to out there. Of course,
yeah. Very little monitoring and
I get the feeling.
Surveillance.
Yes. And I guess as it went on, probably different crowds started coming because early on, several fraternal orders used Joyland to have meetings and various kinds of ceremonies and celebrations there or conventions. So it really sounds at first that it was quite high culture, and then it became an amusement park.
How many years was it open here in Lexington?
I guess it was close to 40 years.
Wow. And it just kind of grew?
Well, about 1942, Jarvis Kincaid bought it at auction.
The ownership exchanged hands?
Yes. Apparently it came up for auction. I never found out why. I did notice that two of the sons of F.K. Sauer had drowned, but that was in August, after the auction was already completed. So I don't think it was a family tragedy that caused the ownership to change. And Martin Sauer was still listed as manager there at Joyland.
Well, these things, you never know. Sometimes it's management, sometimes it's a money issue. And
sometimes it's just time to pass on to fresh hands and fresh ideas.
Exactly. So when did Joyland actually close?
Actually, let's see. It was in August of 1963 when it finally closed. I think it closed down gradually, bit by bit.
Okay.
But
how did the closure come about? Do you know, or
I'm not really sure. It could have been just a lack of interest anymore. By the 60s, everybody had a television. Well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people had television. Of course, there were movies.
There was other forms of entertainment around.
There were, yes. And there were other amusement parks by that time. Yeah. So it could be that they just weren't the thing anymore.
Yeah. I guess people can also travel a lot easier by the 60s, so they can go to other...
Yes, they could go to Cincinnati more easily and Louisville. And
After it closed, what happened to that whole area?
After it closed, there were several more fires. The casino finally burned, like in 1965. There had been some fires at various places before, because it happens when you have food and kindling. Apparently, the land was sold off, and developers began bringing in subdivisions.
Okay, so it was like broken up into pieces.
Yes. Okay. So that when they developed the area, the Joyland Neighborhood Association kind of became the umbrella association for 5 subdivisions that formed there. There were Thoroughbred Acres and Shandon Park, Kingston, Foxborough, and Haylands.
So, and those neighborhoods are still still there, of course. And it's still called the Joyland Neighborhood Association.
I think it's even, if you go in Google Maps, you'll find Joyland kind of in that area.
And so it closed, and other entertainment areas came in its place.
Came in their place. Its day came and went. But really, here in town, we don't really have anything quite like Joyland. It's kind of a shame.
It is.
I mean, we have the traveling carnivals that come through
every once in a while, and then of course you've got your Malibu Jacks and stuff. But it's nice to hear about the history of in the entertainment business here in Lexington. And thank you for sharing that research with us, Denise. Thanks again, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Denise, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Tales from the Kentucky Room, a podcast brought to you by the Central Library's Kentucky Room staff at the Lexington Public Library. If you enjoyed listening, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. If you have any questions about local history or genealogy research, you can visit us in the Kentucky Room to use our collection and newspaper microfilm. Or you can email us at elibrarian@lexpublib.org. That's elibrarian@lexpublib.org. I'm Mariam, and we'll be back with another trip down Lexington's memory lane.